The ethics section of the CFA Level 2 exam can be one of the most challenging parts of the curriculum. It builds on Level 1's foundational knowledge of ethical standards, focusing on complex, real-world applications of these principles. The questions test a candidate's ability to interpret and apply the CFA Institute Code of Ethics and Standards of Professional Conduct in nuanced scenarios, often involving subtle ethical dilemmas. Here, we'll discuss some of the trickiest types of questions you may encounter in the CFA Level 2 Ethics section and how to approach them effectively. 1. Conflicts of interest. Client versus firm. Conflicts of interest questions often involve scenarios where a professional's duty to the client conflicts with the interests of their firm. For instance, you may be presented with a situation where an analyst is pressured to recommend a firm's own financial products over better alternative options. In these cases, the ethical question revolves around loyalty to the client versus the firm's profitability. Tricky element. Candidates often struggle with recognizing where their loyalty should lie in these conflicts. The answer should reflect the standard of loyalty, prudence, and care, which dictates that client interests must come first. If an analyst recommends products due to sales pressure, they may be in violation, even if those products could technically benefit the client. The ethical approach is to act independently and recommend the best product for the client's needs, regardless of the firm's interests. Key tip: focus on client-centric thinking in conflict of interest questions. Always consider if the professional is acting in a way that prioritizes the client's best interest over the firm's or their own. 2. Misrepresentation and omission of facts. Another challenging type of question involves misrepresentation or the omission of crucial information in communications with clients. Misrepresentation can happen through inaccurate statements, selective omission of facts, or even unintentional errors. For example, an analyst might publish a research report that uses outdated information or fails to disclose relevant limitations on the data used. Tricky element. It's not always straightforward to determine if a violation has occurred, especially when omissions appear minor or unintentional. For example, failing to disclose a methodological flaw in data analysis, even if unintentional, can still lead to a misrepresentation violation if it affects the client's understanding. Key tip: ask yourself whether the omission or misrepresentation could impact the client's decision-making. Even small details should be disclosed if they have potential relevance. Full transparency is key. 3. Material non-public information. Insider trading. Material non-public information (MAPI) questions are another challenging area. The CFA Code and standards make it clear that trading or causing others to trade on material non-public information is a serious violation. The tricky part lies in identifying what counts as material and whether the information is truly non-public. For instance, hearing rumors of an acquisition might not be a violation, but overhearing company executives discussing an acquisition in detail could be. Tricky element. Determining whether information is material and non-public can be complex. Information is material if it would likely affect an investor's decision, and non-public if it's not available to the general public. However, questions may involve gray areas like rumors, analysis based on public information, or accidentally overheard conversations. Key tip: if in doubt, err on the side of caution. Unless information is public and accessible, it's safer to assume it could be material, non-public information. 4. research objectivity and independence. In the research objectivity questions, candidates often encounter scenarios where an analyst's independence is compromised. For example, an analyst might be influenced by investment banking relationships or pressure from firm management to alter or delay research findings. Tricky element. The challenge here lies in identifying the subtle forms of influence. Even indirect pressure, such as suggestions from a manager or implied expectations, can violate research objectivity. Candidates need to assess whether the analyst's judgment is genuinely free from external influence or compromised by even subtle pressures. Key tip: if there's any suggestion that external factors influence the research outcome, it's a red flag. Objectivity and independence are critical, and analysts must resist both direct and indirect pressures. 5. Fair dealing. Fair dealing questions test whether a financial professional treats clients equitably, especially in situations involving new stock issues or limited investment opportunities. For instance, an advisor may need to allocate IPO shares among clients, some of whom are more influential or demanding than others. Tricky element. The ethical trap lies in balancing fair dealing with practical constraints. Prioritizing larger clients or those with stronger relationships is tempting but violates the fairness standard. Even if it seems logical to give preference to higher value clients, this approach can lead to ethical breaches. Key tip: in fair dealing questions, equal treatment should be the guiding principle. Allocations should follow a predetermined, equitable policy and be applied consistently across all clients. 6. Suitability and risk profile. Suitability questions involve determining whether an investment is appropriate for a client's unique risk profile and financial goals. These questions can be tricky when clients insist on high-risk investments or want to invest in ways that conflict with their stated objectives. For example, a retired client with low risk tolerance might ask their advisor to invest in speculative stocks. Tricky element. The ethical dilemma often arises when the client's desires conflict with the advisor's obligation to recommend suitable investments. Candidates need to consider whether the advisor has thoroughly assessed the client's risk profile and whether the investment aligns with their financial situation, even if the client is requesting it. Key tip: suitability is paramount. If an investment doesn't match the client's risk tolerance or financial goals, the advisor should explain the risks and document any decisions made, especially if they diverge from initial recommendations. 7. Performance presentation and misleading information. Performance presentation questions test the ability to report investment performance accurately and fairly. This includes avoiding exaggerations, omissions, or selective disclosures that could mislead clients. For instance, highlighting only the best performing assets or not including fees in reported returns can lead to misleading representations. Tricky element. Subtle omissions or adjustments that enhance the perceived performance are violations, even if they don't overtly lie. Candidates must assess if the presentation is genuinely fair, objective, and complete. Key tip: full disclosure and transparency are critical. Accurate, balanced reporting that reflects all material aspects of performance, including fees, is essential. 8. Confidentiality. Confidentiality questions explore the professional's responsibility to protect client information, even after the client relationship ends. However, exceptions exist for legal obligations or cases where the information pertains to illegal activities. tricky element. The challenge is recognizing when to break confidentiality. For instance, if a former client is suspected of fraudulent activities, the ethical decision isn't always clear-cut, especially if legal obligations are involved. Key tip: confidentiality is paramount, but any legal obligations to disclose take precedence. If client information relates to illegal activity, professionals must consider legal requirements carefully. Conclusion: mastering the nuances of ethics. The ethics section of CFA Level 2 goes beyond memorization, demanding a nuanced understanding of the code and standards. Questions are designed to test your judgment, asking you to identify subtle conflicts and prioritize ethical principles over business pressures. The key to mastering this section is to put yourself in the shoes of an ethical advisor. Always prioritize client interests, ensure full transparency, and adhere strictly to the standards of independence, integrity, and fairness. By practicing these scenarios, you'll build the confidence needed to navigate the trickiest questions on exam day.